Right. Shall we just jump into it as we usually do? So yeah, thank you so much, Nick. It's a pleasure to finally sit down. I know you're a super busy guy. We've had we're also probably not as busy, but the London bullion market and the coin market has been it's been going through the roof, to be honest. You've probably seen some of the news headlines. London's running out of gold and all the rest of it. So yeah, really looking forward to today. Jumping into 101 questions. Hopefully we'll cover some some interesting topics as well. And from our point of view, yeah, we're just delighted to sit down with you and hopefully see where this goes long into the future. So I don't know if you want to just explain a bit about your role, your background as well in the coin market.
Sure. Yeah, well, Jordan, hey, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure getting to know you a little bit and having some conversations over the last several months. And I understand you are building quite an empire over there on the other side of the pond, and couldn't be more happy and proud of you. Had an opportunity to see your website a bit, and actually one of our team members, Chad, who helped arrange this, has visited you guys in person, and he was so impressed with your operation that it led to these conversations. And of course, we're happy to support you guys and what you're doing over there, and just couldn't be more happy for you. So both within the bullion world and the collectibles world, obviously there's a lot of room in these industries for good companies and people that do things the right way. And it's such a pleasure to meet someone else that has a similar philosophy and wants to do right by people. So yeah, appreciate the opportunity to sit down and chat. I'm always willing to have interesting conversations with interesting people. So a little bit about myself. So we have a company here in Minnesota, which is kind of in the central northern part of the United States. Our business is really comprised of two components. It's called American Rare Coin Collectibles, and we also own a website called coinsonline.com. And our business serves two purposes. We exist to provide peace of mind to generations of folks who are looking to either liquidate entire estates and collections, primarily of coins and precious metal items. And the other side of our business, we sell bullion, so gold, silver, platinum products. And we tend to stick with what we believe in, which is high quality, low premium bullion products. So think about gold, silver, platinum bars, 1 ounce coins, American Gold Eagles, so on and so forth. So those are the two businesses that we're in. On the bullion side, of course, we get to help people that are looking to set aside money for an uncertain future. And there's a lot of chatter happening right now between, like you said, the UK and America with gold moving back and forth. And on the buying side of the business, where we actually get an opportunity to help folks understand what they have and then help them liquidate it, that's what I find even more interesting, because within that you learn a little bit about the preferences of the original collector, the person that was setting these things aside for years, and you get to have a little bit of insight into what their motivations were, and that's where some of the more interesting things walk through the door. So we enjoy that part of the business a lot too.
Awesome. Yeah, you just never know who's going to turn up, right? We yeah, I appreciate the kind words from Chad. It was by chance, but nothing's by chance. It's meant to happen, right? These things. So yeah, of all the people to walk in, Chad was one of them. We got chatting, and yeah, like you said, here we are. I think as far as the types of people, obviously it's very different. London is it's very multicultural. That the people that we get through the door, it might vary a bit, from where you're at in Minnesota. Does it snow 99% of the time? This is how we see things from our side of the pond, or is it you get to get out in your snowmobiles? Is that 24/7, or is it it's not as bad as people say?
Minnesota is one of those places that you love it and you hate it. Just depends on the season and the day, I think. We have 4 very distinct seasons here. It's probably not too unlike your climate, but yes, absolutely. So actually we have a beautiful couple of days here right now where we're actually back into the 30s and 40s, which is fantastic for February. But we have a team member who's going to be doing some ice fishing up north in March. So yeah, it's one of those places where the weather is what it is, and it's just a matter of, do you want to get out and embrace it and get some fresh air or not? So but it's always nice and toasty inside, so just depends. But our summers are beautiful, and Minnesota is known for our lakes and our fishing, and we have some wonderful outdoor spaces, and so it's a nice destination in the summer. But like with everywhere, there's good and bad, but weather doesn't really slow us down too much. In fact, Minnesotans are kind of a proud people in that we're hardy, whereas the other places in the country, they might be delayed or shut things down because of an ice storm or something. We just kind of get right out into it. We fire up our snow blowers and then we're out.
The UK,
hardy people.
I guess London definitely needs to take a leaf out of your book. I think it's I mean, again, have you been to London before? Have you traveled before?
Yeah.
So as soon as you get a bit of snow, on the railways, everything's shut down. Meetings are cancelled. I can't get in because of X, Y, and Z. But no, it's good to know. It's interesting. So you're obviously, that was where the company was established in Minnesota. It's always been there. Is that right? Like it didn't move?
Right. The company was founded in the early 1990s. Right here, we're actually in the exact same office location, and I ended up buying the majority share of the business just about 3 years ago. And I had come from a world in which I had an interest in coins and metals, and I've always appreciated physical wealth. And my professional career had taken me into finance and also the jewelry and watch world. So that's where most of my professional life was, in the jewelry and watch world. And it was a fairly natural transition here. The founder, the gentleman that I purchased the company from, he and I shared a lot of the same interests and values, and not just within coins and bullion, but also other things like paleontology. The very first thing I ever wanted to be was a paleontologist. And here, John, who started the company, was a big collector of fossils, and had an appreciation for that too. So there were just so many commonalities and things that we shared, and through conversations, it was decided that myself and my partner would be a good fit to take the reins from John, and he could enjoy retirement, and we could bring some new energy and vigor to the space. And so, yeah, we inherited a team at the time of 8 people, and now we're up to 12. We have a wonderful team. We do good work every day, and just get to help people. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. So 3 years ago. So going back, obviously, like you said, you come from a financial background. You love collecting. Obviously, paleontology is very interesting. I didn't know that. Would you say this is something that you felt like all the roads have led to this? That you've made career decisions that have led to this, or is this sort of, like I said, have you been is it in the back of your mind you've always wanted to own a company, or is it sort of 3 years ago it just came about because of good time and good fortune, etc.?
On the personal side of things, I have always been interested in being a business owner and working for myself. At an early age, I was always working, and I always had something going on. When I was in high school and then college, I had my own first small business, right? So the day that I turned 18, I started my first business of my own. And at the time, I was a certified watchmaker. So I started watchmaking as a person in high school, and became a certified watchmaker very early on. And I started doing trade work out of my dorm room at college. Went to college for finance. And so I've always had an interest in history, watches, jewelry, coins, obviously. But I've always had this insatiable need to be an entrepreneur as well. And after college, going into finance and then the jewelry world, ended up working for other companies. But there was always that thing in the back of my mind, that thing that my soul was missing, and that was just to be working for myself. And so the previous company that I was involved with was sold, and that gave me an opportunity to hit the reset button on my professional life. And I made a hard and fast stake in the ground decision that I'll never work for anyone else ever again. And nice. For various reasons, but yes, so it was just the perfect time. So yeah, I think it was the culmination of interests and passions, but also professionally, I was at a time in my life when it made the most sense to make that leap, and I'm so glad that I did, for again all sorts of various reasons. But I think most importantly, it just comes down to knowing yourself, knowing your values, and then being able to live your values every day without compromising something for someone else's benefit that's above you yet. So yeah, I've always enjoyed reading and taking in content about people's entrepreneurial journeys. I love reading about folks that do that. Now with social media and everything you can follow there, that's one of my passions as well, is just small business. And I have a daughter, she's 16. She's a small business owner herself already. And I mean, those are some of the most fun memories we've made to this point, which is just talking about life and money and business and adding value out there in the world for people. And I think that's one of the fun things about the hobby of collectibles. Now, we're not a collectibles retailer. Of course, we buy entire estates and collections and we sell bullion. But as, I guess, an enthusiast / collector myself, I certainly have a bit of a front row seat and can appreciate how the collectibles market has really blown up now, especially with people having greater access to information with what's online and YouTube and so on and so forth. But I know that in your business, you guys sell all sorts of collectibles, and there's almost this new economy of collectibles where people can essentially create their own business from their interest, whether it's shoes or cards or coins or whatever it might be. You can now more easily than ever turn what was a passion into a side hustle or a small business. And I think that's great.
It's amazing how no, very interesting what you're saying. As far as the age bracket, I feel like it's just coming down and down and down. It's like when kids now feel pressure to start a business at 12, 13, 14, like not pressure, but they're talking about it at school now. There used to be the classic, I remember at school we used to have this one chap used to sell sweets out of his bag, and he was the entrepreneur, 13, 14 years old, buy sweets, sell them. But now it's like you said, cards, comics, could be pogs, all these different collectible pieces, you know, growing up, that were just seen as pure enjoyment, have actually held a bit of value. So I think, yeah, nostalgia, I think, is the big thing, right? You know, people went through that COVID period, especially 2020, and it reinvigorated, I think, the love of the past, the love of their childhood. They got bored at home, a lot of people, especially with some interesting rules in the UK. It just allows you to, you know, go back down a bit of a rabbit hole, right? And just sort of re-engage what you used to enjoy, what you used to collect. But we've massively found that. So yeah, coins is still our big thing. But yeah, I can imagine, like yourself, you get some weird and wondrous stuff that's left in the States. You know, people bring in stuff that they, you know, think is valuable sometimes they don't think it's valuable, and, you know, you can give them the good news. I can imagine you had a couple of examples of that, good and bad, right? Both
Oh,
ways.
certainly. And so today's Friday. So every Friday morning we talk about things that went well or didn't go well that week. And one of the things we always highlight is the wins. And oftentimes we talk about what we refer to as Antiques Roadshow moments. Yep. You know, I love watching Antiques Roadshow. You guys have it there as well. And, you know, certainly there are these instances where families come in and they bring boxes of coins and whatever they might have. And they understand that, let's say, dad or grandpa or grandma and grandpa or whatever had set these items aside, but they're really not quite sure what's all there, what makes them interesting or valuable. And most of the time it's common coins and bullion type items. But once in a while there are those Antiques Roadshow moments when, you know, something surprises even us. And it's so rewarding to share that information with these people. And not always are they even going to be the most valuable, but gosh, sometimes there's some really interesting items. And we take a lot of pride in leading with information first, letting people know what they have, and then they can decide what to do with it, especially because we work with so many families. And, you know, once they have this information, someone in the family might decide, you know, let's keep that in the family, or maybe I want to buy it out of it or something. But yeah, we are very fortunate to have a long, well-established business that's based on values. And so we get wonderful opportunities to help evaluate and buy these types of items. So just in the last couple of months, for example, we've seen several, well, I guess 3 raw 1907 high relief St. Gaudens coins, which are, you know, some people refer to the Saint as the most beautifully designed coin ever, right? The Augustus St. Gaudens design, just this beautiful iconic gold $20 coin that, for folks that don't know, they were made starting in 1907. And it's a beautiful way to own precious metal, own gold. It's a $20 US gold piece, beautifully designed, Liberty on the front. Anyway, needless to say, wonderful things do walk in all the time, and it's always helpful and fun to share good information.
Awesome. Did they know the value of those? So did they know the value of those coins when they brought them in, or did they have sort of an inkling that they had something quite valuable there? The people that bought those in?
It's always kind of a mixed bag. So some people have really no idea, and it's always wonderful in that case because we're able to share great news, and they're very excited. In the case of one of those, which we purchased from the family, so the coin came in raw. One of our senior numismatists, Tony, who's an expert in US gold, evaluated the coin, and he was confident that it was genuine. And there were some, with a Saint like that, there's some telltale characteristics on this particular one. It had a beautiful wire rim, but there's other characteristics that aren't necessarily there on every coin that's authentic, and it was missing a couple. And so you know, Tony graded the coin and offered the family a figure, which they were thrilled with, of course. And Tony said, but, you know, it's in both of our best interest to go ahead and have this coin graded. So what I'd like to do is make you an offer based on what I'm seeing the coin, you know, based on how I see the coin raw, how I evaluated it. But before I write you the check for this coin, we bought the rest of the estate right away. What I'd like to do is go ahead and send it in for grading and just confirm the grade that I think it is, and so on and so forth. And they were agreeable. They were happy to do that. So we sent it off to PCGS in this case. The coin graded a bit higher than we expected it to. Tony was expecting a 53, it graded a 58, which is fantastic. I mean, what a fun grade too for a coin like that, a 58.
Wow.
Just barely circulated. And so needless to say, you know, Tony and I were able to call the client and say, hey, we have some great news. The coin came back. It's authentic. It's a 58, and we owe you more money. So we were able to write them a check for several $1,000s in addition to the figure that they had already planned to receive. So that was a nice double whammy moment where they found out they had a wonderful coin, and then they found out it was worth even more than we expected it to be in the first place. So that was fun. And there's other circumstances where we rescue things. You know, I can think of several examples when people brought in a box of silver plated hollowware. And silver plate, unfortunately, doesn't have much of a market nowadays because we don't entertain and enjoy these find lavish.
We do a little bit here.
Items.
This side of the pond we do.
Okay, you still have your tea and yeah.
There's a certain group of people that might buy that sort of stuff from you. But no, I know what you mean. It's of the past for sure. You don't really bring
it's funny because
silverware anymore. Yeah.
We do get calls about silver plated items, and generally speaking, we don't purchase it at all. But what we do say is, there are some silver plated items, but generally speaking, they'll have to be, mid 19th century or English made or something like that, because it was so prolific in the United States in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, where, you had this post-war era of lots of money, lots of baby boomers, lots of things happening. And so everyone had sterling silver flatware and silver plated hollowware pieces and grandma's china. And then through the 80s, people kept procuring Waterford crystal and Hummels and all these types of things that they cherished and they took such good care of. But in the modern age, where people are more attuned to, short attention spans and paper plates, there's just no room for that anymore. But the best pieces, of course, are English, right? Yep. Actually, there's a really cool piece that we purchased from a guest. It was maybe about a year ago that we rescued that I guess has a bit of an origin story in the UK, because it was a box of sterling silver. I'm sorry, it was a box of like a lot of plated stuff, but it was from a estate in Chicago, a relatively wealthy family in Chicago. And so we're pulling out these pieces and we're finding a few sterling pieces here and there. And then we pull out this bowl, and it's kind of this more ornate, obviously hand hammered bowl. And it's got a beautiful patina on it. And I could understand why the customer would have expected that this was plated, because it didn't have any of the obvious markings. But I flipped it over and it said 0.9584, and it had this eagle. And I recognized it as Gorham Martelet. Gorham was the preeminent American maker of silver items. But in the late 1800s, they created a new line called Martelet, which is, I believe it's French for handmade.
Yep.
Is that correct? I don't speak French.
I don't speak French, no, but it rings a bell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think it's French for handmade. But needless to say, they created this separate line, Gorham, right? This it would be, like, a brand like Toyota having a super premium brand like Land Rover or something like that.
Yep.
So Gorham created Martelet, and they did it because there were wealthy families in the United States that had a desire for even better handmade pieces that traditionally were always made in Europe. And so they were buying these higher grade products from Europe, not just 925 sterling, but higher grade 0.950. And so Gorham created this new line, Martelet. They hired craftsmen from Europe, brought them here, had a whole new factory, and they produced sterling silver items, but not in sterling, but in higher grade, in this case, 0.9584 silver. And they were all handmade and hand chased. And it was just so cool to rescue this piece of history, of which, there were only a few thousand Martelet pieces made in total. And it not only shared good news, but very small numbers. So yeah, mostly coins and precious metals, but we do get other funky things here once in a while too.
Awesome. No, it just reminds me of it's more common than that. There was about 5,000 of them made. It's called the 1,000-year monarchy set. I don't know if you've had a few of those over your way. It's a sterling silver set, 50 bars, monarchy going all the way up to, Queen Elizabeth now. And it's one of those sets. It's in sterling silver. As mentioned, there's 50 bars, but there's so many of them popping up now because they're these items that have just been inherited from, a grandparent or, a dad or a mum. And they just don't know where to put a value on it. They don't know how to put a value on it. They'll go on eBay, someone's got something for 3,000, another seller's got it for 2.5. There's no sort of transparency there. But it's a super set. And even just the silver weight is probably about £2,500 now. So, when they bought it back in the sort of late, I think could have been the 70s, I think it came out, 70s, 80s. It must have been, pence compared to that. But it's great, yeah, give them the good news, even if they're getting just a bit over spot for it. In some cases, other people, want to sell it for a bit more. Like you said, it's been in the family for 10, 15, 20 years on the mantelpiece. It's a nice, sort of showpiece when you come in. But like you said, people are sort of doing away with these bits now. It becomes a bit of clutter, right? These modern houses and modern way of living. It's not really the same, is it? But as far as just one question on that note with silver and obviously gold, what would be the ratio if you had to sort of guess roughly of how much you deal in silver compared to the gold at the moment?
I'd say it's half and half.
Straight in the middle? Okay.
Yeah, I would say so. In fact, we have a lot of clients who are looking to purchase bullion. They're always asking that question, what should I buy, this, whatever, that way. And we're not advisors. And we've been around the business long enough to know that metal markets are always going to go up and down. But there are some very, very strong opinions out there on both sides on the gold and silver debate. I would say most folks that are purchasing metals from us are doing a balanced approach, purchasing a bit of both, but there are some that are very bullish on one or the other, to the tune of hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars where they're just all one and none of the other. I think there's probably some very distinct advantages to both as well, just depending on what people are looking for. And, thinking about your audience, there's, if you have 10 different people that are buying bullion, there's probably 11 different reasons why they're buying it. But for the most part, most folks that are working with us, they've worked hard for their money. They have something to lose, and they're a little bit uncertain about the future. And they look at gold, silver, precious metal products to take back a little bit of control. Having a bit of physical wealth within arm's reach, within their possession, gives them a lot of peace of mind. And there's really very few things out there that are as liquid as precious metal bullion items. But it's not just numbers on a screen. So imagine that couple that, again, they've worked hard, they've done all the right things, they've checked the boxes, they've got their retirement squared away and this, that, and the other. But it's all just numbers on a screen at the end of the day. So they like the idea of taking some physical wealth control. Now, when it comes to that, if you're going to be accumulating a significant amount of metals, one of the things that comes into mind for some folks is just portability. $100,000 of silver is heavy. It takes up a lot of room. And if you're looking to move at any point in the future, it's a lot easier to put some gold in your pocket than, carts and carts of silver.
It goes far to say it's in some cases disappointingly small, the gold size. I don't know if you probably get it from time to time with clients that we get, there's your kilo of gold. It's like, oh, where's the rest of it? But it's extremely dense, right? But yeah, like you said, it's what would you prefer? If you've got the storage facility, or you've got the means to store silver, it's great. But like you said, as soon as you start accumulating like these silver stackers do, I can imagine you need extra facilities. Is that something that you guys offer, storage facilities, or have you got people that you push them towards for that?
We don't have on-site storage or provide any storage. I would say that our clients that use storage facilities are doing it only because they have to. So if they're doing it within a tax-advantaged retirement account, so here we have what's called IRAs and Roth IRAs, and people can own metals within a tax-advantaged retirement account. And in that case, it's a requirement to use a third-party depository. But beyond that, of course, we do have some clients that use depositories here in the United States. But again, there's advantages and disadvantages to that as well. For the folks that like going that route, the important thing is to find a depository that you know and trust, and that has a reasonable and transparent fee schedule. And for everyone else, I think part of the beauty and the value of owning precious metal items is its physical wealth. And if it's within arm's length or within your control, I think it is the best for most people. But you guys offer storage, I believe.
We do, yeah. We offer it, as a company. We do, to be honest, on the whole, tend to try and push people towards third parties, just simply because it's a lot easier to access. Just because we don't have the facility where people can walk in when they want. And you get a lot of clients that want to touch base, come in, check on the gold, or add other bits. But we only store metals, and some people request, can I store could be documents, could be anything that certificates or whatever. So we don't offer that. But yeah, it's definitely a growing market for sure in London. It's a shame because of the crime rate seems to be going up a bit in London in particular. So people are seeking storage outside of their home, and a lot of insurances don't actually cover, or they cover up to a certain amount, don't they? So I don't know if that's is it the same there? Like, do you need like a sort of special insurance there with coins or collectibles?
It is similar here. So generally speaking, under folks' normal homeowners insurance, there's limitations on cash and like bullion type items, unless they're specifically scheduled. So we usually encourage people to maintain their own records. So take their own video or pictures of what they have, understand what they have. And interestingly enough, whereas it sounds like you have more private storage facilities, it's very unusual in the US to have private storage where you can actually visit your items. More common are these massive IRS approved depositories that are not accessible to individuals other than by way of, you send an email and you say, hey, release my metals, send them to this address. But your typical walk-in private storage is not really a thing, except with banks that offer safety deposit boxes. Now, of course, those safety deposit boxes don't offer insurance either. And so really you're putting your faith into the folks that are working at that bank. And, depending on how long you want to Google, you can probably find some horror stories of things that have gone missing. So yeah, there doesn't seem to be an all things to all people perfect solution, at least over here. But I can certainly appreciate and understand that there's probably going to be a growing demand for that type of service, for secure, storage that offers transparency in everything that they do, and also allows you to come visit it and get it out. You know, we saw during the pandemic a need for folks to go to their bank safety deposit box and get items, but they were limited because some of these banks unfortunately had reduced operating hours, and it made things a lot more difficult. I think a lot of people woke up to a lot of things during the pandemic, having more time to think for themselves, which is fantastic. But one of the things was this realization that the system needs to work. And if it doesn't work, well,
who can you turn to, right? Like,
who can you turn to? So
you're used to turning to the system, but if that system doesn't work,
yeah, things need to go right, and generally speaking, they do. But once they don't, you kind of realize that there's vulnerability, and I think that's prompted a lot of people, rightly so, to try to take back a little more control themselves. You can't control everything, but there's some things you can. So that was just one of the things.
Makes sense.
And we saw it here, in the West, also in Canada, right? So Canada was, freezing the accounts of individual people that were supporting the truckers, right? It was this big thing. And once you realize maybe you're not in full control of the assets that you thought you were, you want to take a little bit more control back, which I think is good. Our ancestors had a lot more control over their food supply, and they were probably a lot more likely to know their neighbors and help each other out in times of need. And there's this old adage, at least over here, that people would stuff money under their mattress or they'd bury it in the yard. There's this mentality, this post 1929 Black Friday market crash mentality of people that maybe grew up a little bit more hand to mouth, and this idea that once you have something, you never ever want to lose it, which I think prompted the way not only people thought about money, but also how they turned to collecting, and once they've had their hands on something, they never wanted to let it go.
For sure. It reminds me of a story. My dad's side of the family, an auntie, great aunt, they went through her house. This was after her passing, probably about a month or so afterwards. And it turned out she had a lot of books on the shelves, and for each book that she had on the shelf, there was a whole selection of books that had 5, 10, 50, 5, 10, and 20 pound notes in each page. So the idea of, like you said, keeping the money under the mattress, it wasn't just a joke. It was dead serious. It's like, it's safer in a way in a book on my shelf that's a bit unsuspecting, but it's quite something. There wasn't a huge amount, but there was a good enough amount to shock people. But it's like anything that I think at the moment, if your current government or the whole system is, it's very interesting, especially in the UK. I'm sure the US is on an even larger scale, but we had a small situation. I think it was yesterday or today, with just a couple of the banks, home, I think it was Nationwide and a couple of others. They just had a security outage, or their apps went down, and it just meant that a couple of million people couldn't get their paychecks on time. So all it takes is for this to happen. People are left in the dark. They've got mortgages to pay, they've got bills to pay, but they can't access their paycheck. So I think this sentiment is growing. It's always been there, I think, but people are seeing what's going over on your side of the pond, especially with Trump. And I don't know what your thoughts are. Obviously, we could talk for hours about it, but do you think he's good for gold overall, or good for the metals market? How do you see that panning out?
It's hard to say if any one country or policy is good or bad for gold necessarily. And at least our business isn't really built on a need for gold to do anything in particular, right? We create a liquid market in every market, but I think the idea of gold worldwide is a hedge against maybe inflation, but also an uncertain future. And historically, it's always been a store of value. I think the Trump administration has some very, very, very bold and exciting ideas to right-size this the ship that's been out of control for a long time. And I'm not just talking about the United States. I'm talking also about just fiat currency in general. Our entire world is built on fiat currency, and this idea that we all agree that the paper is worth something, right? It's the medium of exchange that we have all agreed on. But the problem with all fiat currency is if you don't regulate the ability to print more, you will print more, and ultimate power ultimately corrupts. And it's too easy to create money out of thin air in order to pay for things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to afford. And that's what's been happening in every corner of the world for a very, very, very long time. And to this point, the smoke and mirrors and the house of cards has continued to exist. But I think the writing has been on the wall for a long time that it's not sustainable. And again, we're not advisors, and I'm just a guy from Minnesota, but I've paid attention for a long time, and I'm a student of history. I find this stuff fascinating. At some point, the music's going to stop if we continue on this trajectory. And Trump and his administration, they've taken a pretty bold stance to say, I mean, Musk even from the White House said, we can't continue this, our country's bankrupt, right? So this idea that you've got to cut expenses, you've got to cut spending, and somehow in some way you've got to stabilize your economy and your currency without creating an implosion of not only your economy but everyone else's.
Knock-on effect.
Yeah. And a real fascinating thing is happening right now where there's this immense amount of physical gold flowing back to the United States. And historically, for years, there's been issues with the difference between gold on paper and gold in physical form. Yep. And it seems like every time some country requests physical, there isn't enough there to fulfill that obligation. And I suspect there's a lot more information behind the scenes that will probably never be
disclosed,
really disclosed. But it certainly creates interesting times. And I think that generally speaking, for people like you and me and the people that we serve, there's an absolute verifiable, justified reason that people are looking to alternatives for the future from our normal fiat money. When there's never-ending unfunded obligations and money printing in order to kind of hold up this house of cards, it certainly makes sense people are looking to other asset classes. Namely in recent times, it's been crypto. Obviously, forever it's been gold. And geopolitically, you have these countries and institutions and federal reserves, I guess you could say, that are now posturing to do something different. I would expect that if we were to sit down 10 years from now, the world of currencies will look different from how it is now. You guys went through a big transition. Oh, go ahead.
Well, wait. Just to double down on that, in what way, for those people that don't know, do you think it would look different? And it's hard to, in the next 10 years. But because the only reason I ask is just because there's been this rhetoric, especially the last 5 years, that gold is outdated. Crypto is going to replace gold, and the crypto market is going to create a new currency. There's going to be new currencies for each country. We toyed with this idea in the UK for a little bit. That was a genuine idea at one point. But do you think there'll be a drastic change? Do you think can't see the dollar being replaced right in such a short space of time? But you're thinking the market will just look a bit different.
It has to look different at some point. I mean, it wasn't all that long ago in the historical record. I mean, the previous world reserve currency was the British pound.
Sure. Yeah.
That was replaced by the dollar, and inevitably someday it'll be replaced by something else. Obviously, there's been a lot of issues with the fact, I suppose, that the world has started turning away from the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. You see oil transactions happening outside of dollars now, whereas 10 years ago that never would have happened. Yeah. And by the way, this is big. This is big stuff, right? This isn't just what currency are we going to use. This is also determining which countries are going to go to war or have gone to war, or what nation building is taking place, and all these sorts of things. So these ideas have very widespread implications. And at the end of the day, what seems to be happening right now out there, and again, I'm just a guy from Minnesota, but just as someone who generally is paying attention, there are some big tug of wars happening, and we're not quite sure, I think, who's going to win the future of money. At the end of the day, you've got countries like China that have been systematically buying up more and more gold, and they're pulling back on other things they've traditionally done, like buying U.S. treasuries, right? So they're letting their position on U.S. treasuries go to the tune of, significant billions of dollars in favor of gold. Now, why would they be doing that? They're not collectors of gold, but they realize the long-term intrinsic value of a precious metal commodity, any commodity really, relative to the value of any dollar. So I don't know. There's been chatter for years about the BRICS nations creating a new currency, perhaps backing it in part by gold. There's chatter about countries adopting new forms of cryptocurrency, or using crypto to also supplement the existing currency that they have. So inevitably changes are coming. I don't know what that means for every different country, but I think probably the best thing people can do to prepare is just try to educate themselves a little bit and keep some powder dry, keep some liquidity on the sidelines, able to move when they need to, and just don't get caught flat-footed. I think when planning for your own future, try to keep your options open, But at the end of the day, too, these things that we're talking about are the size of tidal waves, right? You're not going to influence what's going to happen. So I would just, from a personal and human standpoint, try not to let it take over your life in terms of stressing you out. You know, if you're standing on the beach and a tidal wave is coming, you can stand there defiantly, put your arm up and try to stop it from impacting you, or you can find something that floats, and when it comes, just ride the wave. And there will be some that stand in defiance, and there will be some that ride the wave, and then there's going to be even others that try to find ways to allow that tidal wave to benefit them in their own community, right? How can we harness the power of these massive changes, however hard they might be, and emerge not only you know, as a survivor, but emerge better for it. So I don't know. I don't know. There's a tremendous amount of uncertainty when it comes to not only currencies, but how it's going to affect humanity, I think. Yeah.
Sure.
Where do you see it all landing?
No, I think you raised some really good points. I would say, I mean, you got me really thinking about, and we talk about it a lot here with culture, global culture. You know, you've got European culture, American culture, South American culture, Asian culture. We've got, you know, BHA that's part of our team here, Elton and Luella. They brought in a lot of, you know, Chinese clientele, specifically expats in the UK. And it's amazing how, I guess it's the lack of understanding here in the UK. I think we're a little bit behind when it comes to education on metals, on commodities, on how that all works, the whole process behind that. Because you look at, say, I don't know, Greek culture or Turkish culture, even, you know, a lot of these currencies, or a lot of the people in these countries don't hold the base currency. They tend to hold gold because they've experienced it, right? You know, you saw in Greece, you know, pre-2008, you saw, you know, even now, Turkey, their inflation is through the roof. Iran is another good, you know, example. They barely, when you talk to people, especially Iranians that have moved here, they barely hold their currency because, you know, it's just worthless. They'd be walking around with you know, trailers full of it, you know, just to buy certain things, and you've seen it in other, you know, African nations. So I think it's interesting how there's, you know, we live in a world of globalization, yet we don't really learn from other cultures, really, and what they've experienced, right, until it's, you know, it hits our shores. And like you said, there is an inevitability about it all, which you don't want to stress about too much, because like you said, you'll be up at night thinking about, how can I do this, how can I do that, how can I protect this, how can I protect you know, the people you care about. So I think, yeah, it's really good guidance, I'd say, because, you know, like you said, we can't give advice on what to do, but I think at the same time you can lead people, you know, into the right direction where most of the information is. I think, you know, we live in an information world that what do you actually believe nowadays, right? You know, someone on TV might be saying, you know, buy gold, the next person might be saying do this. So I think it's just trying to get the best information in front of people and the best, you know, data or whatever, which I think is, yeah, definitely where the gold market, I'd like to get your opinion on it. Do you feel like it's lagging behind a bit compared to other markets when it comes to education? Someone, you know, being at the forefront, telling people, you know, this is a good reason to buy X, Y, and Z? Or do you think, because I feel like the UK is a bit outdated, to be honest, you know, with the gold market, with their approach. They're normally family institutions. They tend to be pawnbrokers that have turned into companies rather than the other way around. So it'd be interesting to get your take on that. If you think, yeah, you know, with AI, how are you going to, you know, integrate that into, everyone feels like the pressure to integrate that, but at the same time, you know, it's knowing what's sustainable, right? And I think the education side of the gold market, anyway, in the UK, for our people listening here, it's not as, there's not as much out there as you think.
No, I think it makes sense. You know, gold hasn't been used as a true currency, at least in Western society, for a very long time. So a lot of people are undereducated on it, right?
Yeah.
And there's even some fantastic YouTube videos out there of, you know, people on the street that, you know, they'll offer someone, hey, would you rather have $5 or this, you know, 10-ounce bar of silver? And they always take the $5, right?
Sure.
So there's a lack of awareness at a scale level. But I think the same is true in just about every realm of personal finance. So few people, everyone knows how to spend money and open a credit card, right? Because that's easy. But fewer people really know how money works and how taxes work and how to save for their future, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it kind of falls under the bigger umbrella of just financial education in general. I think is probably lacking. And I think COVID helped. I think the internet age that we're living in helps, because there's access now to so much information for those who seek it and want to learn and educate themselves. But I think there's a bit of a dichotomy, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because there's so much bad information, which is devastating, especially in the gold, silver, platinum, bullion world. And I'll just give you a little bit of insight into what I see here. Too often, we have a number of folks who see advertisements for let's say gold and silver, whether it's in a magazine or on the radio or the TV or what have you. And you've got the good salt of the earth folks. They might have grown up in the jewelry business or the pawn shop business or what have you, and they have their perspective. Then you have the more modern bullion folks that are selling items that are high quality, low premium, and then you have companies that are really just there to take advantage of a hot market. And every industry has this, right? Whether they're folks that are in the financial advisor world or people now with solar. I don't know if that's a thing where you are, but here, all the time you see these guys pounding the pavement, door knocking, selling solar panels. And is solar good for your home? Sure, it absolutely could be. But there's a lot of people that are providing bad information and selling really, really high commission, really, really high premium products to people that frankly don't need them. And I see a lot of that in the metals world too, unfortunately. And here, the most pervasive issue is some companies that are targeting older generation Americans that have significant money saved for retirement. And they're really pushing and encouraging those people to move it into precious metal IRAs, which for some folks, it's a great strategy. But what I'm seeing is these companies that are pushing products that are not the best for the person purchasing them.
That individual.
Yep, exactly. So let's say someone has, $500,000 to move into a precious metals IRA. They want a tax advantage retirement account. They want to own metals within the retirement account. For all intents and purposes, 99.9% of people are going to want to own products within that IRA that are high quality and low premium. So they're going to own basic bars or gold eagles or gold maples or Krugerrands or I guess Krugerrands don't go in IRAs, but those types of products that are known worldwide. They're easy to buy. They're easy to sell. They're very, very transparent in the pricing. That's the stuff that you want. But what I'm seeing is people that are being sold, let's say $500,000 worth of, some obscure country, obscure size, limited edition, whatever they might be. And instead of being the spot price plus a little premium for any physical product that makes sense, we're seeing the spot price plus a premium that could be equivalent to double of the spot price. And these people are just being raked over the coals because the phone salesperson that's paid a high commission on the other end is benefiting. And so in this age of information or lack thereof, the question, do we need more? Yes, absolutely. I think finding good quality education at any source from folks that aren't necessarily financially incented to give you bad information is the thing. So there's this term caveat emptor, buyer beware. It definitely applies here as well. Ask questions, find folks that lead from the heart and have the heart of a teacher, and want you to have all the information before you make the best decision for yourself.
Yep, that's really good. It's interesting. Do you think then, would you say more regulation would help, or what do you think is the solution to something like that? Because like you said, there is a lack of there's no regulation around metals to a certain extent, but as far as the collectible space, because it is a popular, like you said, it's gone through this resurgence in the last 5, 10, 15 years because people do want to get back into collectibles, and it's that connection between collectibles and gold that sort of gets people excited with, old sovereigns, guineas, especially here in the UK, the historical stuff, British historical pieces. They've done very well, they're well above the gold price. So I think there is a good market there, but it's a very small percentage, right, of all the coins in the world that you could argue have got, historical value, numismatic value, credible value that could be tracked, and you can see it at auction, for example, because like you said, a lot of these pieces, they might look great and sound great and they are limited edition, but there is no secondary market for it, right? So I guess that's do you think more transparency would help there, or more regulation around coins? I don't know how it's not really a market you could regulate. It's a tricky one.
I'm always a fan of more transparency, but regulation is tricky because, again, ultimate power ultimately corrupts, and regulation is only as good as the regulators. And at least here in the U.S., right now we have a big problem with I guess, kind of a bloated bureaucracy, right? It's in some cases creating more problems than it's solving. And here, even locally at home in Minnesota, not necessarily related to our industry, but the desire of the people that were putting regulators in place was to help solve problems and smooth things out, but it tends to sometimes have the exact opposite effect, right? So I don't know if you've seen the headlines. I'm sure you haven't, but we've had a number of nonprofit organizations in Minnesota that have been found to be not doing things the right way, taking money, COVID-related money, and not providing services that they said that they were. And you'd say, well, gosh, there should be regulations involved. Well, there are regulators in place. They just weren't regulating.
Yeah.
And so, and even now that some of these things have been uncovered and the curtain's been pulled back and we see what's happening behind the scenes, even now we're limited on what the bureaucrats themselves, the governments themselves, can do about it, because there's more hoops to jump through. So yeah, I believe in ultimate freedom, liberty for everyone, and I have very little patience for when anyone infringes on the natural born rights of anyone else. So I'm kind of this person, this is just my personal views, but I'm the type of person who believes in ultimate liberty. We are all free people. We're born free to do what we want, when we want, but that stops when you're infringing on the rights of others to do the same. And so I'm kind of the mindset that I prefer as much freedom as possible, but I prefer a pretty iron fist when it comes to holding people accountable for doing things poorly. And so is there room for regulation in there somewhere? Yeah, probably. And here in the US, there is a pretty good level of regulation at the state, county, and city level for precious metal dealers, but it's inconsistent. I would say there's definitely room for greater, maybe a more universal standard for folks that are in the precious metal world. And I would say that there's probably room for more state attorneys general to communicate and go after the bad actors. We have been contacted by attorney general outside the state of Minnesota, inquiring if team members ours would work as a expert witness, I guess you could say, against other companies. And we've not gone into that realm before, but especially for the companies that are the most predatory, I think there's more that could be done to expose those companies in probably every industry. But yeah, I'm not sure that they need more regulation, probably just greater enforcement of the laws that already exist.
Yeah. And for someone who's new to this market, what would you say are the big things to look for, the positives and also the negatives when, say, if you're approaching, a bullion investment, you're thinking in the same mindset as we're talking about, you've got a bit of money tucked away. Yeah, what would you say is for good and bad, what would you say the key things are to look out for?
Pricing transparency is number one by far. Here in the US, you can get sucked in and signed up and subscribe to companies that will get your information and they will never let it go before you ever even know a price of a single product that they have. They're smooth talkers. They're very good at creating the pipeline, but once they have you, they never let go. And pricing transparency is not something that they lead with. So I would say, like with anything, it's really important to have pricing transparency, and then just find a team of folks, of people that you like to work with. People in the precious metal industry are not fiduciaries. They do not operate with your entire financial picture in mind. They are not financial advisors. They are there to provide a product when you decide that you need it. But to protect yourself, I would highly recommend just finding places that are happy to share information with you and the questions that you ask, and don't seem like they're trying to sell you something. I would say that would be the most important thing, because this is money you've worked really hard for, and you don't want to see it just squandered. So,
like sound guidance. I think it's interesting because we get a lot of I think the best business for us anyways, it's always referral, right? It's people referring the next person along the line. I guess one thing that we sort of pride ourselves on, but we've done pretty well with, is we're a small company. The saying is, we're like a what's the saying for it? I'm trying to think. We always use it and I've just forgot it. We're small enough to care, or big enough to, I don't think what it's called. I'll have to come back to it. It'll come back to me. But the idea is that we're a small company, but we try and, from the outside, we look pretty big. We've been around for about 10 years. But as soon as you get into the realm of, like you said, seeing these great advertisements on TV, you see companies, posting left, right, and center on socials. Sometimes it can just be a bit too good to be true. So we try and take the approach where we'd rather do quality business, less of it, but it's just more sustainable, right? So I think, like you said, you've got people coming back to you left, right, and center. And so I think a lot of the older companies, maybe, especially in the UK, have done a pretty good job, because it's a family, Shards, Atkinsons, there's a lot of other companies that are family owned. And for that reason, they've kept it in the family, and they've, wanted to have keep a good reputation. And they are probably, I'd argue, they, as well as us and a few others, there's, very transparent with the whole process from start to finish. But it's interesting, because I guess transparency is one of those things that it's a shame unless you sort of push for it. A lot of companies aren't really willing to give it, are they? Like I said, they'll bring you in, but then at the same time, not tell you too much about actually what product you're getting. So for someone that is starting, what would you say would be the the best way to start? Like, if you got, if you had $10,000 or £10,000, where would you start if you were new to this?
Sure. There's no substitute for being able to see these products in person. So if you haven't before, I'd highly recommend going to Bullion House or a company like ours, American Rare Coin, and just going in and seeing it in person and asking some questions, just getting familiar with it. In fact, we have clients all the time that'll call or come in for that express reason. They've heard about it, they hear all the chatter, but what is it really? How much gold can I actually get? But once you see it, it starts to help shape your mind in terms of, okay, I do want to buy this, and here's where I'm going to store it, so on and so forth. And then I guess the next piece for me would be, don't feel like you have to start with your entire budget. So if you're planning to put $10,000 into metals, maybe start with 2,000, see how it feels, and then a couple weeks from now, then bring the other 8. But there's some value, at least people that are getting into it for the first time. A lot of people go in with the mindset that they have a certain amount that they want to put into metal, and then they're done.
Yep.
And for those folks, it might make sense to do it all today, or it might make a little bit more sense to do a little dollar cost averaging and doing some this month and some next month and some the next month, and just kind of work your way up to it. And I think over time, doing it that way, it just builds greater comfort in the process and the items themselves. And then for those people that are stacking over time, I really like the idea of starting with the piece that's most important to you and then working up to your ultimate goals. So we have some folks that want this immediate peace of mind, right? They want the immediate sense of, okay, now I have a good amount of wealth in my hands. And for those people, they might just want to start with gold bars. A brick of 25 gold bars fits in a pretty small area, and they can go anywhere in the world and it's worth the same. And just having that peace of mind is massive. Then beyond that, then they can start branching out and stacking silver in various sizes. They can start thinking about the utility of the metals that they're putting aside. So I think every case is a little bit different, but I would say visit a place in person, see them, touch them, feel them, ask questions, and then just get started. Even if you're not going to put all of your eggs in one basket right away, just start, and you'll start to become more comfortable with the process and deciding what else you want to add next, whatever it might be.
Yep. Awesome. You mentioned at the beginning about you've got, obviously it's a team of 12, you mentioned you've got a numismatist, is that right, on site? So say if someone came to your store, you've got someone that could actually say, help verify a piece, as well as obviously give a bit of, background about some of the coins as well, because they're few or they're hard to come by. Good numismatists nowadays here in the UK. I mean, you guys are, your PCGS authorized an NGC, or do you predominantly use one more than the other?
Yes, we do have essentially revolving doors with major grading agencies where we're always sending in coins of ours for grading, and PCGS, NGC, and CAC. PCGS and NGC being the majors, and CAC being a little newer. But yes, we are very fortunate to have some wonderfully experienced team members on staff. We have 2 senior numismatists and then several numismatists in addition to that, who have really dedicated their entire careers to coins. And so it's but you're right, it's an industry that is relatively small at the top levels in terms of the knowledge, but it all started with a little spark of an interest early in their lives where they just decided, hey, this is my life, this is my world, and they never stopped learning, and the passion never went away. And I'm sure lots of your listeners are really passionate about cards or coins or comics or whatever it might be, and really it's the passion that creates the numismatist. And there's people in numismatics that have different areas of specialization that's usually driven by their personal interest. Tom, one of our numismatists, is amazing in foreign and also currency paper, in addition to U.S., of course, but he's very passionate about those areas. And then Tony is very passionate about U.S. gold, and Mark is more interested in bullion type items. And so everyone kind of has their own area of expertise. But yeah, we're very fortunate to have a very experienced team, and most people can help with 90% of the things that walk in over the counter. But we're always able to call over the other person that specializes in this or that. And of course, with my background in watches and jewelry, that's my jam. So if someone has something of significance, they're pulling me out there as well. So, but yeah, we're very lucky. Whereas some smaller shops wouldn't have that luxury of having so many answers under one roof.
Yep. Awesome. I know that you've because Chad mentioned off camera, I've seen your new website as well. Is this something that because like anything, right? You want to do the same thing that works. So, you've been operating for so long now. But with a new website, there's 101 different companies out there, right, in the US. But would you say then, would that be the big thing for you? Your biggest selling point as a company is the fact that you can come in, transparency, because obviously we often get it. There's often confusion. We often get calls from different people who think they're calling another company because everyone looks the same in the UK. Or they tend to, because it's the same product, right? We're not selling anything different other than the price. Obviously the service is a bit different. But is there anything else that you guys sort of, I guess, pride yourself on that makes you a little bit different compared to other competitors?
So our absolute, by far and away, biggest differentiating factor between ourselves and everyone else is our values, and we're truly a values-based company. So we're experienced, we're honest, and reliable. And I think there's probably a lot of companies out there, especially in larger corporate worlds, where they have their values and they're hanging up on the wall, and people might look at them at lunchtime, but it never really sinks in. It was set by someone in an ivory tower somewhere, but we live our values and we talk about them all the time, and it's really who we are. And we so happen to be in the coin and precious metal world, but we really believe we were like put on this earth to provide peace of mind for generations. And we help folks that, they're unfortunately dying or downsizing, and we help their kids and we help their kids. And we really help generations of people every day understand what they have and what it's worth. And we kind of feel like it's our calling as a business. It's why we exist. And it sounds so simple, but I think that's probably the biggest differentiating factor between us and the others in the market. And it's a reason why the majority of our business is just repeat and referrals. The traditional business of American Rare Coin Collectibles has existed for decades, and it does great business and it's wonderful. And the new piece, the Coins Online, is just our way of dipping our toe into the new age of commerce. And whereas a lot of companies will wither and die with their owner, when the owner goes, so does the business. We want a business that will continue to help generations long after I'm gone too. So, we're trying to build something bigger than ourselves, but we're doing it in a sustainable way. We're not looking to, crush any records or rip any market share from all the other majors or something. But we're just we like to keep our head down, do the business the right way, and it seems to be working out so well. So, and you guys being just 10 years old, that's another point I think that's worth mentioning. In the coin precious metal world, there are wonderful legacy, long-standing companies that are wonderful, and there's also brand new companies that are wonderful. And I wouldn't necessarily send someone somewhere just because they have longevity. It's important to understand: is this really the type of company that I want to be working with? Are the people accessible? Are they the type of people I want to do business with? I mean, your company being 10 years old, you guys are really doing wonderful work. I mean, and you're helping solve the problems that your clients have, just with what I've seen you guys doing already. It's great. So longevity is a nice thing if companies have it, but it's not necessarily a prerequisite to being able to do business the right way.
Awesome. That's really good insight. I think, you reminded me of, like you mentioned it previously, about that every customer that walks through is different, right? There's different needs, different this, different that. And I think because we're quite small, you guys are relatively, size of your team wise compared to other companies, quite small. I think it's just nice to have that ability to be able to pivot. If someone walks through, someone that's retired, 80 years old, wants to leave this stuff as a legacy compared to a 20-year-old, it's a totally different angle. It's a totally different approach. So I think that's what I think the older companies maybe lose a little bit or people or companies that have done it the same way for so long, have a model of this should just fit everyone, right? And like you said, out of 10 clients, every single person's different agendas, they want different products. We get people coming all the time. They buy coins because it's their birth year or it's the year of the zodiac sign, but unless you ask these questions, you never know, right? So I think it's just asking the right questions. But yeah, I appreciate the kind words, and it's it goes both ways. I think it's nice to have another company that we can put people onto. I think it's from a business point of view, people ask, like you said, is it good for business when gold's up? Is it good for business when gold's down? It's it's always good. Doesn't matter what, because that's not how we make our money. So it's nice to have similar sort of like you said, similar values. But it's important, I think, because it gets lost in the land or the world of commerce, right? Like you said, it's few and far between. But yeah, no, amazing, really interesting insight. I don't know if you've got anything else you wanted to cover, or because I think we did cover a lot. And
I'm curious on in your market there locally, what collectibles are catching fire right now? Here in the U.S., we're not in it professionally, but there's seemingly a tremendous market, especially for the younger generation that's impassioned for shoes, Nikes, and Pokemon is still a major thing, and these card swap meets where people are searching for the right version of this card or that, and Yeah, it seems to be a very active market, not only in person but online, and unboxings and everything like that. It's kind of fun just to be a fly on the wall to that passion. And when I attend coin shows in person, there seems to be a pretty healthy amount of younger people that are coming in with a passion for it, but they're all looking for their separate little angle. Whether they're upgrading coins or searching for things that maybe are undervalued, what have you. But just wanted to see what the market's like in your world.
I mean, if we're covering collectibles in general, I don't know, sorry, I'd say, like you said, the sports card market is massive. Sports cards, I think, in the States, and it's amazing how much we watch, say, the NBA or the NFL, because we get, the NBA and the NFL are traveling a bit now. They come to Wembley, they come to the XL, so there is a bigger market share here than there used to be. And English fans are very diehard fans, so I think the younger generation, if they can start collecting things that's associated with their favorite club or favorite player, even like Luka Doncic going to the Lakers, it made waves here, not just in the States. Everyone was talking about it here. It's it's a huge deal here, but everyone just thinks it's the States that cares about this stuff because he's got international appeal as well. So sports cards for sure. I think the coin market, it's interesting you say that, because we go to lots of coin fairs and the average age definitely is coming down for sure. It's there's people out there that kind of know what they're looking for, so they must have done their research. They're hitting these coin fairs early in the morning before all the good stuff gets sold. So there's people, we've done a few fairs there. Old sovereigns, are just a staple. Specific years people are after. Guineas have always been super popular, but all the modern proof stuff, I think. I mean, the Royal Mint, I don't know about the US Mint, but the Royal Mint they've gone through ups and downs as far as I wouldn't say bad series, but they've done a lot of series, right? The Royal Mint, they're bringing out a lot of new coins. But overall, to be honest, they've brought some really cool, the James Bond series that did really well. There's a lot of excitement about that. Again, gold prices and the popularity of that has dropped a little bit, but there's a lot of different series that are coming out that do intrigue the younger generation. Like, Paul McCartney, the Music Legend series. For certain people, they just like collecting it. You're paying a bit over the gold price, but it just interests them. They've got that interest there. So, the collector space is, and what's nice about it is you've got that blend. We do these events here where you've got someone from the coin market, someone from the whiskey market, someone from the comic market, but they've all got something to talk about because they're coming about it the same approach, right? They've got a joy for it, they've got an interest in it, so they can kind of understand an interest that someone else has in something else. It's not as if they're coming about it, how much money are you making or how much can we flip this for type thing. It's a different approach, but it's a nice balance. It's a nice balance if you can actually make money in this industry now, without ripping people off, but also doing something you actually genuinely like, which we're super fortunate that we can actually do that. But I don't know how it equates to US trends. Again, we normally follow what you guys do and purchase just because of the market cap's bigger over there. But I mean, one player in particular, I think we touched on it on a previous chat, was Anthony Edwards. I'm a big fan of Anthony Edwards.
Okay. Yeah, so he's a Minnesota Timberwolf, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And just because of his character, I think a lot of UK people resonate with him, the way he conducts himself. But I think for me anyway, I love him and I've got a bunch of his cards. So I'm not hoping that he becomes the next Michael Jordan. I just like the guy. I think he really comes across as normal. Doesn't care, which is cool. I think it's nice to have it on camera. But it's not as if he doesn't care out of not caring. It's just he's got his own persona. He's not allowing people to touch that, which is cool. But I'm sure he's a big. There's a lot of fans your way. You don't want to get rid of don't want to get rid of them. Hopefully they don't do a Mavs and trade him.
Right. Yeah. It was interesting watching Luka go from the Mavs to the Lakers, and I followed the NBA enough to be dangerous, I guess. But it was fun with the All-Star format this year, where you had essentially an international team going up against the old school, American team, and some more of the rising stars. But if you look at the makeup of the NBA right now, a good portion of the top 10 are all European players, which is really neat. And there has been a concerted, very conscious effort to bring more of the U.S. sports market to Europe, obviously by having games played there and everything, much to the chagrin of some of the U.S. fans, especially football fans. There aren't many games to begin with, and then some of these being played at different hours in Europe. But I don't really care about the NFL enough to care that they're trying to expand their market share. It's probably a good business decision. But interesting that that you guys have an appreciation for that as well. And I always enjoy people that are passionate about whatever they're collecting or whatever they're following, because I think passion inspires in whatever it might be, right? If someone's really passionate about one thing or another, it doesn't really matter. But if they're into it, then that's all that really matters. And I think at least for me, a lot of the fun of collecting has been the hunt, the chase.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, you can click a couple buttons and add it to your collection, or you can kind of like wait for the right moment or the right deal, or find it in person instead of online or whatever it might be. But yeah, that's a big part of it too. The chase, and then learning about it in the process. Like there's a lot of things that I've purchased and kept over the years that I never was looking for, but you found the opportunity, you heard the story, or someone else was passionate about it, so then you learn more and then you became passionate about it. That's just kind of how it goes.
It's interesting. We had a chap on the podcast a while ago, and he was, very open. And I think that would be the difference, I'd say, if I could put, something that will differentiate between someone that is a collector at heart and someone that's in this industry, because it's their professional career, is that hunting, the idea of the hunt, because, you can hunt something for so long, get it, and then I'm just on to the next one. I'm not thinking of, like that goes, you found it. There's that feeling of, oh, it's over now, but I need something else. It's just this constant, I could find something else. And I think you see that in, we get it, like I said, weird and wondrous things turn up. And it is still possible. You can find these gems. There was just an example of a certain painting that was found at a secondhand store. It's in a North London area in Golders Green. I think it was bought for about 50p. They got it appraised, took it to Sotheby's. Turns out it was about $12,000. Sorry, equivalent about £10,000. And it was signed. They did some provenance, checked it out. But people think it's not possible anymore, but it really is. So I think for those people that want to get out there and find these unusual coins or unusual pieces, it's definitely still possible. And I guess it's still the same in the States, right? It's, these we see it here anyway on YouTube and Instagram. People rummaging through yard sales and finding these gems. Do you think it's still possible? There's still stuff out there?
Of course, yeah. Absolutely. People in the coin world talk about the heyday, right? The pre-internet age, when it was easier to buy things that were original and raw, and but with the internet age and more information, it's easier for the owners of these items to kind of understand what's there. So maybe the garage sale idea is less common, but gosh, we still hear about it all the time. Nice. Interesting pieces of history being kind of rediscovered, and that's what I love too, even outside of coins, is just when you can understand a little bit more about these historical items. And I have an appreciation. I'm a bit of a sentimental guy too, so even sometimes things that aren't necessarily valuable. Say, Chad, there's that wood box right there on my desk. I don't know if we can grab that, but sorry, just an aside.
Yeah, sure.
So here's just like some random item that came in the other day. This is more probably, you might know more about stuff like this, but it's not particularly valuable. But it's antique Roman glass,
cool.
From probably 400 AD, and it's not our business to buy stuff like that, but it walked in the door, and I knew enough about it to understand and share with the client what I thought it was and what it was worth, and we purchased it just because it's cool, because I don't know, it's history, and again, it's that chase thing. The pictures behind me, you can't really see it, but the one right here in white. So, very tragic figure from history, your history, Bruce Ismay. He was the president of White Star Line that made the Titanic. And his father was one of the founders of the company. And then anyway, so Ismay ended up being in the position he was in based on the family connection. The Titanic set sail, inaugural voyage, unfortunate tragedy, went down, thousands of lives were lost. And Ismay, I don't know if you remember the movie Titanic, where Ismay was portrayed, but as the story goes, Ismay was very proud of the Titanic, and he wanted it to obviously be the most opulent, most luxurious ship, and it was already making all the headlines, but he also wanted to arrive early. He wanted to arrive to New York not only on time but early. He wanted to make that extra headline. And so the story was that he encouraged the captain to increase the speed while they were going through obviously iceberg infested waters at night, which led to its tragic ending. And Ismay escaped with his life on one of the life rafts, of which there were too few, as we know. And it wasn't just women and children first, because Ismay found himself a spot on one of the life rafts, which was maybe not the most honorable thing to have occurred. And when he arrived to New York, he tried to go back to London right away and was stopped. The court-martialed, essentially kept in the United States for some congressional hearings, and he was obviously lambasted in the media, treated as almost a target for this horrible tragedy. A lot of the blame was assigned to him, and even after returning to London, he kind of lived the rest of his life in relative obscurity because he was so guilted by what happened and his actions. And we had a letter come in on White Star letterhead from the month after Titanic went down, signed by Ismay from his office back in London to to someone in Idaho in the United States that wrote him a letter, and he wrote back, and somehow it managed to make its way into our shop. So we've got the envelope, the letter, Ismay's signature on the thing, and I hesitated to putting it up in my office because he's kind of this tragic figure, but I also, you know, understand the dichotomy of like human existence, and it's a very interesting piece of history. And then right next to him, we've got Abraham Lincoln and his Secretary of State, some letters back and forth between those two a couple weeks into his presidency. And I don't know, it's the hunts, the chase. I never looked for those things, but when they found me, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so cool. And it's fun to share that history with other people too.
Awesome. No, it's nice. Again, like you said, you never get a, like, you know, you're torn between putting it on the wall or not, but like you said, it's history's history, right? You know, for better or worse. So it's really cool. Amazing that we can do it though, be in a position where, like you said, you just every day is different. You never know who's going to walk in the door. Which, that's long may it continue, the hunt. and
I would say that the uncertainty for the future is very apparent as well. And who knows what the next year, 10 years are going to look like. But no matter what, there's always going to be folks like yourself and us that are in business to help people buying, selling, whatever they're looking to do. And there's always going to be a market for some type of collectibles. It's hard to say what that'll be in the future as well. But just have fun, buy what you like, try to do it from folks that you want to do business with. And when you have the opportunity to help other people, just try to do it with their interests in mind and not be self-serving, right? Lead with information, education, and try to do things the right way. So
great advice. Amazing. Thanks so much, Nick. No, it's been a pleasure. We covered a lot, and for everyone listening, I'm sure there's some a lot of nuggets in there to take away. So awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you very much. Cool. Have a great day.